Hello folks, today I'd like to share with you the various modifications and customization I've done to this particular gun cabinet. I would not call it a safe, it is not a safe. And the same idea can be done regardless you buy the same brand as whatever I got or any other brand. The idea is the same, right? So first we'll just show you the overall and then I'll go through the details of how I've actually done it. So inside the cabinet, it was initially just all the same black steel, right? So all of that carpeting can be done by yourself aftermarket, as well as you notice when I opened the cabinet, that light up. Okay, so a lot of these budget-oriented cabinets, they do not come with those $5,000 or $10,000 gun safes. Okay. The internal lighting feature. So all of that is hooked up to a motion sensor right here, and the light strips are around the edges. Okay, lights up really well. And one of the things I want to show you is how that wiring is brought in. So you can actually attach quite a number of electrical features. Let me try to move this into view without touching it. That'll be really hot. That's a dehumidifier rod. All right. So now let's take a step back and let me break down all the various steps that I did. And as far as the actual accessorizing of the interiors, a shout out to another YouTuber, Jeb McConnell. It was from his video that I got many of the ideas. So credit is due where credit is due. Now specifically, what are new in this particular video is when I planned this project, there were a lot of tricks that were not mentioned in any other YouTube video about as far as how to stand the cabinets on a wooden base, right, in order to not kill your carpet, as well as how to run that wiring utilizing that wooden base, and then also how to mount it, how to anchor it to your wall stud, to maximize the security aspects of what is really a budget cabinet. It's not a safe, it doesn't weigh hundreds of pounds, but we could install it in a way that makes it really, really tough for would-be thieves or burglars to try to rip that cabinet off of the wall, right? If they get it off the wall, they will be able to weigh down with a pry bar. They will be able to put their whole body weight on trying to bend that door, right? And once that door frame is bent, if the locking anchor points are no longer locking, then that basically compromises this particular style of gun cabinet. Now, the first thing that you get when you receive your cabinet, right? You're going to notice that the shelf that was already factory installed, this thing showed up in a giant vertical box on my driveway, right? You take that out of the packaging box, and what you will notice is this vertical wall right here, right? It is anchored to the bottom plate of the safe, right? The bottom metal of the safe. And the way it anchors, that screw goes from the outside inward into the cabinet. So that protruding screw head is gonna play a number of tricks on you. Either you place a cabinet like this, either in your garage, all right, or in your unfinished basement. If you put it on some kind of a level ground, that whole cabinet is going to wobble because you have that one screw. It's actually on that side of this. You have that one screw head poking out, right? So it's sticking out the bottom of the whole cabinet. The rest of the cabinet is where the metal ended. So the whole cabinet is going to sit wobbly right on that one point, right? So for that and another reason is why I added this piece of particle board, right? Otherwise, if it sits wobbly on a hard surface, or if you try to put on a carpeted surface, anytime you move the cabinet before you anchored it, you're going to tear up your carpet underneath, right? And by putting it on a wooden board, I'm able to smooth out the board. It will not tear up my carpet, right? And I also built into exactly the wood board. See where this is the anchoring point? There is a channel there to run my wiring. I'll show you that in a moment. Once you receive your cabinet, you've inspected it, and you decide it's not dented or not dented bad enough to the point, right, that you could actually decide to keep it as opposed to return it. Two things you actually want to do first. One is examine the shelf configuration that you want. This particular board, this particular shelf, it was not there when I received it. I can't remember. I think this was mounted over here, right? And I knew that what I was going to get does not need the entire length, so I wanted a small shelf in here. And come to find out that there was no hole on that wall to pass the screw through. So those two screws that you see, those holes, I actually had to drill it myself. Now these cabinets, they are made of steel. All right, these cabinets, they are made of steel. I'll show you the other side. All right, you see that mounting hole? That was a manufacturer pre-drill mounting hole for this height. If I wanted that hole, I will find it there, but I wanted this shelf here. All right, so had to drill that myself. So as with any steel, if you drill fast, you will work harden that steel. So if you set your drill on high, that will get harder and harder, and you will have a hard time to drill through. So you actually want to set your drill to about the lowest setting. You don't want it to heat up. It will work harden, it will heat harden, all right? And similar to masonry drills, right? When you drill masonry drill into bricks, you want to cool down your drill bit once in a while. Same thing here. You don't want that work spot to work harden or to heat up from your drill. All right, so slow is fast in this case. That's the first thing you want to do, making sure you got your shelf configuration in the right positions. Second thing you want to do, and this is before messing with anything else, is you actually want to take soapy water and just do a good wash down on the inside of the cabinet, the entire inside, all right? And why is that important? Well, so the cabinet is painted coming out of the factory. So they don't coat any oil or grease for reasons of rust proof, the cabinet. But you will find a coat of oil. You can actually feel with your hands when you receive this. You will find that coat of oil all over the inside of the cabinet. Personally, I believe, again, it's not so much on rust proving it, but it more had to do with the workers in the factory having grease all over their hands, and as they're assembling, as they're welding, as they're drilling and whatnot, you know, as they touch it, they're getting all that grease onto the cabinet, right? And any amount of grease on the cabinet, later on, when you try to stick anything on it, right, you will get oil fouling on your adhesive will fail. A lot of people complained about the LED light strip, right, not really staying sticking. That's because of that oil, all right? I got it back up here, just in case. Okay. Let's move on to talk about that baseboard. All right. So obviously you would want to have measured your cabinet's dimension, and a lot of people mistakenly think that they need that baseboard to be the exact same dimension, and that's not true. So what do I mean by that? Well, the people who subscribe to weights loading theory along the edges, there's a little bit of truth in that, but if you look carefully here, right, there is a turning radius on this cabinet, both on the top, same thing on the bottom. I'm just showing you on the top because it's easier to see. So because of that turning radius, same on the bottom, the weight load bearing doesn't really happen right at the edge. It happens a little bit inside the edge, right? So when you prepare your baseboard, you can actually recess just about like 1/16 of an inch, right? Narrower than the cabinet itself, 1/16 of an inch on each side. One's on the left, one's on the right. So that's on the width, if you want to do it that way. Now on the depth is the place where you want to pay extra attention. Remember we talked about running wiring through this baseboard, which means it needs to come out the backside somewhere. And that's why either the way you mount, see this? The way I anchored to the wall, right? I didn't need to leave any gap on the board. So again, this recess 1/16 of an inch this way. But if you don't do it that way, all right, if you actually run the same spacer as the floorboard, and we'll talk about why you do that, all right? But if you push this cabinet all the way to the edge, then you do need to recess this a little bit outward, at least on the corner where the wire needs to pass out, okay, needs to pass through. If you wanted to go all the way to the back on the depth on the rest of the cabinet, you could do that, but make sure you have space to let the wire come out, all right? Let's now talk about the preparation of the baseboard after you've cut the width and the depth dimension. So clearly, you would want to put your cabinet on top of a baseboard, and that's of course before all the carpet or whatever is in there. And you draw your circular trace along all of your anchoring points. This one is just behind. All right. So unfortunately, I'm shooting this video after everything is done. So that's all covered up by the washer, right? But you want to trace those circular holes. Why would you do that? That allows you to know exactly where the cabinet is going to mount and how it's going to mount to the wooden board, right? So once you've drawn that circle, right, you want to also trace where your smaller washer, notice this side is smaller, the side that I don't need to pass a wire, I used a much bigger washer to spread the load, all right? So this is the only hole where I used a smaller sized washer, right? You want to trace that as well, so you know how much space is available to channeling for the wire. Hopefully some of that shows up, okay? And you would want to draw on that wooden board, on the particle board, right? Here I use particle board, you can use plywood, doesn't matter. You want to then draw guidelines all the way to the back of the board. And you can make your initial cut using oscillation tool in the shape of a V, all right? You use like a semicircular head, and you just cut slightly into the depth, and you run that way. Same thing, you cut slightly this way, and you run that way. It is not going to be perfect, but it gets the initial channel, it gets that job done. That removes a bit of the wood. The rest, you can either use a Dremel, that's how I started that, or what I did after the Dremel was just running, it's catching and running out of my hand, I used a grinding circular tool attached to a power drill. I will show you the link at the bottom, all right? So you can use that to then complete the rest of, gouging out that channel and actually smoothing it at the same time. It got smoothened to the point that when I pass the wire through and set the cabinet onto the board, that wire, I was able to slide it in and out, okay, very easily, no friction at all. That's how much you want to cut it. Now let's talk about the wiring. The type I used is a 3-plug or 3-receptor extension cable. That's how it really is. All right, I will show you on the actual wall side of a plug. This is a 2-prong type. All right. So that is the plug head that I found that is small enough to fit through that manufacturing hole, literally the way that it is, okay? If you want to pass through a bigger plug head, it is possible for cutting, right? Basically extending the size of the hole. Just again, I would need to remind folks that that steel is not easy to cut through, right? This is not just some cheap metal. This is steel. I don't know if they use stainless, but it is steel. And it work hardens, so you need to cut really slowly. So after passing that through, right, you secure all 4 anchor points, and that basically gives you your basic power supply. Now, the way I run the rest of my cabinets, right, I've got one side going into the motion sensor connected with the LED power strips. I have another side going into this heat rod for dehumidification, right? So by having it electrical heat rod, that way I am not messing with any kind of a bag or cartridge that once it absorbs sufficient water, you will actually need to somehow renew that, right? So by using heat rod, I go to a 0 maintenance inside of the cabinet. There is still one more head that is available if I wanted to hook that to something else. And for those of you who may be OCD, right, worried about potential break-ins that the thieves remember to cut your power from the outside, right? Or let's say at nighttime, due to confusion, you yourself trip on the plug that's on the wall, right? And by that point, you have no power. You open the cabinet, you get no light. For those that are OCD about that, it is possible to use a power strip, right, with integrated battery. So I'll attach a link on that on the bottom. I don't have that for this cabinet. In my household, we do use that for our Wi-Fi, telecommunication, etc., so that stays uninterrupted power supply. But if you want to get that one of those in here, you certainly could. There is space for that. Also, a word of caution, be very careful when you choose the type of washer, how thick they are. Check the thickness of that steel, all right, and the thickness of the particle board. Therefore, be careful on the length of your screw, all right. Choose them wisely so that you are not poking the head of your screw beyond the particle board, which defeats the purpose of why we put it on the board in the first place. All right, that same thing will be important in the next topic we talk about, which is how to anchor this whole cabinet to the wall and the wall stud. Now let's talk about anchoring this cabinet to the actual wall stud. All right, so unfortunately I'm making this video after I finished most of the interior. I wish I had recorded it during the middle of the work. So a lot of things are covered by the carpet and you don't see those holes where the screws are at. I can actually feel with my hand, but it's very hard to show you. All right, there are 2 points on the top, right, left and right, and then there are similar 2 points behind all this junk, left and right, okay, at the bottom. And what those points do, right, like this was a cabinet really designed for the American homes, how American homes are constructed, right? So there's that wall stud marking. When I was measuring, and this was done with an ultrasound tool, right, to identify where the wall stud was, and that determined where I mount this whole cabinet, right? You would want to align those holes, right? Here's an interesting hole on top. So the one behind it is probably just a little bit in, right? And then similar on this side. I don't know what these top holes are used for, but anyway, good for venting, I guess. What you want to line that up with the wall stud. Why? On a budget cabinet such as this one, all right, one of the weak points is getting this pried off the wall, right? And now the thief, the burglar, the whoever, right, they've got your whole cabinet sitting down with its opening facing up. And now they can lean into these gaps with their pry bars and lean their whole body weight on it, trying to bend that door, right? That is probably the #1 weak point for a budget cabinet such as this, all right? So simply by denying the burglars or the thief's ability to get this off the wall will be one of the biggest steps to increase the security on the cabinet such as this. In fact, if you look at the installation guide for these cabinets when they show up at your home, all right, included in the installation guide, they suggest you to install this in places where along both edges, all right, your wall, like your actual home wall, actually comes out and it'll be flush with this cabinet, right? Now, I think for most people, having that installation location is very tough. So here I will show you how, when you install it just along one wall, not even 2 walls, okay? How do you secure your cabinet so that you deny burglars' ability to rip this off the wall anchor? And that, my friend, is where the spacer bars comes in. Remember we talked about the spacer bar at the bottom, right? Similar spacer bar on the top. So notice this is where that wall stud is. Similar on the other side, all right? If you don't have this spacer bar and you simply get the bolt straight through, if you left a gap up here, the burglar can stick a pry bar exactly in this orientation, and when they lean that bar into the wall, their counterpoint, their pivot point, is now leaning right along the dry wall where it's right next to it, right on the stud, all right? So they're now using the stability of your stud as a leverage, all right, to be ripping this off of that mounting point. Similar thing, right? By mounting it here, I deny them that access to right where I have the screw anchor. Now, if they try to poke a pry bar here, right? The reason I don't bother with spacing blocks to avoid the pry bar coming in, right? The reason I don't bother with that is if they stick the pry bar this way, right? The bend in the pry bar is going to push against the drywall right here. But what's behind this drywall? That's the stud. The other stud is over there. So right behind here is nothing but maybe some insulation, or actually this is a interior wall. So there's nothing behind the drywall. So he pokes a pry bar here. He weighs on this. All he will create is a hole in the wall. My cabinet will still be properly anchored. All right. Fast forward, come down to the bottom. Again, all right. That's why I have this spacer bar, so that the anchoring screw pushes against a washer, right? And that you do want one of the biggest washers that's possible to properly spread all that load, right? Through the washer, through the cabinet wall itself, through the spacer bar, through the drywall, and all the way into the wall stud. You will want that screw to be roughly 2.5 or 3 inches into the wall stud itself, right? Wall stud, they call it a 2x4. So 2 inches is this way, 4 inches that way. You want to be roughly 2.5 inches, maybe 3 inches into that wall stud. Now, because of how far you're going in, because those screws are massive, right? Once you're talking about that kind of screw, you do want to pre-drill it. So before you even move this cabinet in place, you will want to have pre-drilled through that wall stud, so you're not risking splitting that wall stud when you force the really thick screw into it. All right. Now we're ready to move into the beautification on the inside, or the accessorizing of your cabinet. All right. So hopefully by this point you did remember to have threaded that wiring, otherwise that was off or not. Okay, so it's anchored to the whole cabinet is anchored to the wall, and you've got a nice power outlet here. Okay, the next thing is a combination. You choose which one you prefer. I put the LED lighting in first. Okay, and initially I did not hard mount that particular motion sensor, because I wanted to test different locations of the motion sensor before I made it permanent. So I used simply masking tape. You roll it back on itself, right? And then you can further secure it with another strap right across that. So I tested in this orientation, I tested over there, I tested at the top of this working this way. I tested a number of places before I decided, hey, let me mount it on the bottom of the ceiling inside. All right, so you get that LED strip. The LED strip position should be fairly simple. All right, so again, if you don't want to permanentize it, you can use masking tape to just hold it temporarily, and then you open and close your cabinet a few times to make sure you like all the location where the lighting originates. Right. And even while the motion sensor is temporarily mounted, that's okay. We can start the rest of the carpeting work. All right. So again, that's why I prefer to mount the LED lighting first, because now I can actually see what the heck I'm doing. Right. This cabinet, most of them are painted black. Right. There are a few that may be painted gray, but despite that, right, like you can see well in here only for 2 reasons. One, I've got the LED power. 2, for filming of this video, I moved in extra lighting. They're sitting all over, like right outside the cabinet door right now. Otherwise, without that lighting, and if this is all dark inside, without that carpet, right, there's no light bouncing off anything. It's just pitch black. It's very hard to see what's in there and what you're working on, right? So that's also why for the carpeting, I did not want a overly dark color. I just wanted a gray color family. So that way I do get a nice visual contrast against any other black firearms, okay? As well as just, I guess some lights bouncing off of the carpet and able to give, other ambient lighting on all the objects that's inside, all right? So that's that, folks. That's basically the modification we've done so far. There's a lot more you can do.